Hello lovelies, I'm terrible at pimping my stuff, so here I am, pimping my stuff. Please like, subscribe, and most important of all, share, so that people can discover me and all the wonders that I offer. I grow weary of shouting, "It's poverty," at people all the time, which is largely what I've been doing since America caught fire. People don't care about statistics, they care about anecdotes. But so let's tilt at a different windmill, shall we? Universal basic income. Is it a viable idea? I think it is, and I think I can demonstrate that in a relatively simple fashion here now. But then again, I'm going to be using statistics, and those really don't seem to convince people. But let's give it good old try, shall we? First we need to look at the UK's current benefit system, because I'm going to use the UK as a model because I know the statistics better and I know how everything works better. So in 2018-2019, that fiscal year, the UK spent around £222 billion on various aspects of welfare spending. The majority of that is made up by the state pension. Then you've got tax credits, basically if you're not earning enough in a way, or if you're underemployed or your employer doesn't pay that much, then you get tax credits, which basically means that you don't get taxed on some of your income, or in effect it tops up your income. In the same way that in the States, say Walmart employees can still qualify for certain benefits, similar to that. So that's a big slice. Housing benefit. If you're not earning enough, then the government will top up and pay some of your rent or give you council tax relief or a combination of the two so that you can stay where you are and not be rendered homeless. You know, good thing. That's a big chunk. Disability benefits, that's a big amount. Incapacity benefit, which is kind of the same thing, but not really, I guess. Child benefit is a fairly big chunk. Pension credits, which is kind of like tax credits in a way, I guess. Job seekers allowance, which is our unemployment benefit, and then there's a chunk that's just kind of designated other. It's hard to really drill down into what that is. 222 billion in all of those arenas. That's quite a lot of money. So how would a basic income compare to our current welfare spending? Well, first you have to decide what you want to set as the level of basic income. There are various things we could use for that, but I think one of the most obvious would be unemployment benefit, because that's considered to be enough that you can get by. That's often not true in a lot of places, but also low enough to incentivize people to look for work. So if you're on unemployment benefit, that seems to be what we societally have agreed or conceded to be an amount that we're willing to give people. Now, for a single person aged 25 or over, that's about £75 a week. It's more complicated than that. If you're younger, you get less because you're assumed to still have access to parental home and so on. If you're a couple, you get penalised, which has never made a huge amount of sense to me. You lose quite a bit of that income. But overall, let's just say £75 a week, which is slightly higher than it actually is. If we gave every single man, woman and child in the UK £75 a week, it would be about £260 billion per year, which is about 40 billion more than we're currently spending on welfare. That's big, but it's not a huge difference. And other things would change as well, which you have to take into account. In practice, we probably wouldn't just give £75 to everyone. That would include children and babies. There's an opportunity for exploitation there, so we might want to offer less from age 0 to 18, perhaps. We might want to give pensioners a little bit more. We might want to top up the benefits that disabled people get. It wouldn't necessarily be that simple, but if that's the amount that we're looking to play with, that's the kind of amount that we're talking about. And it's not an impossible amount. And you also have to consider that it would save money in a lot of other ways. Basic income trials have led to less strain on the health service, particularly mental health services, so you would save money there. They have resulted in sometimes huge drops in the amount of crime going on. A UBI trial in Namibia almost dropped the amount of crime in the area that it was trialed by 50%. It increases employment, albeit not by a huge amount, versus the control group during the Finnish basic income trial. People worked on average an additional 6 hours in the period if they were on their version of universal basic income. People started up businesses because they felt that they had a secure enough base that they could take a risk. People took jobs that they wouldn't necessarily otherwise consider doing because they felt that they had that basic income in place anyway and they needed something to do with their time, and the additional money was appealing. We would save on policing, we would save on bureaucracy, we would save on healthcare. There's all manner of knock-on effects from supplying UBI that make it even more viable. We would still need some bureaucracy. You'd need to be able to handle appeals and so on, problems, issues. But so much of that bureaucracy falls away, and all of these other societal knock-on positive effects take place. So if you're a fiscal conservative, you would think that this would actually be appealing because of the removal of governmental bureaucracy and the overall savings that take place. In the same way that fiscal conservatives should be all for public health care, because that saves a colossal amount of money and gets rid of a lot of bureaucracy and issues. So there's more than just the humanitarian side that we think everyone should have some kind of basic level of participation and care in our society. There are sound financial, economic reasons and social reasons to do it. Of course, you've got to convince people, and that's the hard part. Given the success of UBI experiments, and given all of the benefits that appeal or should appeal to both left and right, you're left with the question ultimately of why we haven't done this. And I think this cuts down to the problem that I think most of our societies are having. If we look into the past, we have leadership, we have vision, we have ideology, we have people who have taken up political positions who have practical life experience, or who have driving ideologies. It's not necessarily always good, but it can be. But the point is they have a vision beyond simply having and wielding power. And they have taken steps to try and educate and inform and convince the public. What we seem to have in great swathes of the world now is this populism. And even before this current surge of populism, we had a professional political class who were invested in the status quo and who were windsocks to public opinion. Wherever they thought they could get advantage and get votes, that's where they moved. They didn't have conviction. They didn't have principle. And human psychology is very much against UBI, even though we would all benefit. People care about fairness. That's why so many people are dead set against relief of educational debt. Because they see that as someone else getting something for free that they didn't. Even if they've suffered and they know how bad it is, they don't want to see someone else get something for free. And there's this bias that makes us far more willing to punish people for some sort of perceived transgression or having it easy compared to us, even when it costs more and doesn't make sense. I mean, I keep using this example, but for at least 1 year, more was spent here in the UK chasing benefit fraud than was actually lost through benefit fraud. that barely made any headlines or bylines or anything in the papers. We would rather spend that effort, that money, that time punishing someone for transgression, perceived or real, rather than letting it go in a way that would benefit everyone. And that's part of the reason it's so hard to sell these ideas to people. It feels wrong. It jives against people's common sense understanding of reality, their anecdotal experience of reality, their subjective experience of reality. And that's another big problem. People are prioritizing their own personal experience and not seeing the broader picture. You see this in the left, or when they prioritize people's subjective personal experience, their lived experience over reality. And you see this on the right, where they often pick on anecdotes or talk about a particular case of a welfare queen or whatever else it might be, as an argument against something that, sure, there will statistically be a few outliers who abuse systems and screw them up, but would help the vast majority of people who are actually good, decent, honest people. But that wanting to punish that 1% maybe of people who abuse the system or get something they don't deserve means we end up punishing the 99% of people that don't abuse things. You can think of it kind of the same way that we do about piracy protection on software or something. That 1% of pirates, they're going to work their way around it anyway, regardless, whatever you do. And all you do is inconvenience the 99% of people who are decent and honest and pay properly and stick with the rules. So it's a hard sell, and we don't have the kind of leadership that's necessary to make that sale to people, to have that vision, who are convinced by it. They're watching the opinion polls, not trying to change public opinion. And I think that's the problem behind a lot of what we're facing. We have no leadership, we have no effort to educate or convince. That's left to lobbyists and media interests. And their interests are not necessarily the public interest. But there you go. It's not as expensive as people think, which isn't to say that it isn't expensive. It wouldn't be as simple as a lot of people like to think, but it's also not anywhere near as expensive when you consider all the knock-on benefits in terms of policing, healthcare, and so forth. It's an idea whose time has come. We don't have someone to sell it. Not even Andrew Yang. Zang.
In his house in R'lyeh, great Cthulhu lies dreaming, and when he awakens, he shall have the morning wood of aeons. Call of Cthulhu is a deeply pornographic card game. Enjoy your tentacles.